Building a linear lift for your robot that never skips a belt sounds like a bit of a dream, but this design makes it reality. In this video, I'm showing you exactly how to construct a rock-solid linear slide system using Misumi slides and belts, featuring a custom motor mount that's so robust the 3D printed mount itself is going to shatter before the belt ever skips a single tooth. I guarantee you that this system will give you reliable, practically maintenance-free linear motion for your robots. I'm Coach Pratt, and with over 10 years coaching robotics and design technology, including leading national champion FTC teams and Aspire Award winners, I focus on designs that deliver under pressure. This is an updated and improved version of one of my previous popular designs. I'm going to run you through the entire step-by-step build process, highlighting how to correctly rig the belts and build this motor mount with its integrated idler bearings. When we're done, you'll have the knowledge to build a linear lift that just works every single time, giving your robot a killer advantage. So in terms of all the parts you're going to need, this is the Misumi SAR 330 slides, but you could use 230s as well, or 220s. Any of their 200, 300 series works. Quad pillow block, some of my custom 3D printed adapters, depending on how many you need. A variety of different hardware. What I'm using here is I'm using GoBuilda's conversion kit for their Viper slides. I find that's just a really convenient way of getting all the ball bearings that you need for building this up. Use some G2 timing belt, and then your favorite motor. I would recommend a 435 motor or an 1150, one of those two. You're also going to need these little custom motor mounts. I've got the STLs down below. You could 3D print these or laser cut. I've got these cut out of polycarbonate. Anything would work. As far as tools go, I recommend a magnetic parts tray. This is really helpful for keeping track of your things. And then I like my little bolt solder here because it allows me to grab any bolt that I want, roll it on. I didn't get the correct size. So let's start with that motor mount. I'm going to go ahead and grab the other piece here that the actual motor is going to mount to, and we're going to slide it so that this edge is flush with the end of a 3-hole channel. You could use a 2-hole channel in this and go ahead and lop these off. Just on my design, I've made a little extra support, but I wouldn't say it's necessary. We can start with some 12mm bolts here. I'm going to slide this through on the second hole down. I'm going to go ahead and put on a lock nut for this. Because this is going to be your motor mount, you definitely do not want this coming undone in the middle of a robotic lift. That would be a terrible idea. You want that to be staying on as much as you can. So, a lock nut. There you go. Lock nut really helps with that. And then, so that I'm nice and supported all the way across, I use the furthest support. Again, my design uses quite a large motor mount. I wouldn't say it's necessary. And realistically, if you're going to be incorporating this on your own robot, you may consider some sort of custom mounting yourself. We'll do the same thing on the back, so the motor is going to end up sliding through. Again, I'll grab some more 10mm screws here. And then sometimes I find it difficult to get that point in, so I'll grab that nut, I'll just hold my thumb against it, and I'll actually use my Allen key to get it started, and that makes life a lot simpler to get started, like that. We'll go ahead and tighten this one up as well. Then we'll do another tighten to the other side. Again, about as wide as we can so we get a nice large base of support. I'm going to use that little finger trick on that one again, because that is becoming a challenge for me to actually tighten that one in. And we'll get that nice and snug. Like so. Beautiful. Now we've got our motor mount nice and assembled. We can go ahead and take our motor. We can go ahead and slide it in. So when you slide your motor in and you go to actually place it in, you want to think about where your wires and cabling are going to go, if they're going to be facing towards your robot or away from your robot, because this is where our slides are eventually going to get placed on. It's up to you. As we go to secure this in, we're going to secure this with some low-profile bolts. Low-profile bolt simply has just a 2mm head. The standard bolts that GoBuilder provides are 4mm head. You can see that it's quite a bit shorter and takes up a lot less space, and we need all the space we can get with this mount. I'd also recommend you add a little bit of Loctite to these as they are holding in your motors. As this is just a tutorial, I'm only going to use 2 bolts here. but you should definitely put in all 4. Now comes time to add in our idler bearings, and here's really where that magic kind of comes in. We've got these little small 10 millimeter outer diameter, 4 millimeter inner diameter idler bearings, and what these are going to do is these are where the real magic of the mount comes in. Problem with a lot of belt slides is that you end up skipping teeth. So these teeth here can end up pulling and skipping along the tooth. So we're going to use these little bearings as an idler to push down against the belt. And as we're constraining the belt against the teeth, that means that we actually shouldn't skip any gears. And I have tested this. It is so strong, I've actually shattered my small plastic inserts before I have skipped a tooth. So it is a serious amount of torque. Now we're going to put a couple little standoffs next. These are 8 millimeter standoffs. They are through hole, they're not threaded. And then on the motor mount, you've got 2 smaller internal circles here and then an outer point there. That outer point is going to be for a constraining support here, but these inside ones are going to be for these idler bearings. So I'm going to couple 20 millimeters here. I'm going to grab that idler bearing, slide it on like so. I'm going to slide on that spacer, put it through the bottom joint, and then we're going to put a lock nut on the other side here. Because again, you definitely don't want these things coming undone. We'll go ahead and give this a nice tighten up. You don't have to go crazy on these things. We'll do the same thing on the other side. My 20 millimeter, my idler bearing, my 8 millimeter standoff, thread through the small side, and then my nut. Go ahead and tighten those up. Check you haven't over-tightened or compressed those bearings and they are still rolling nice and smooth. Next, we're going to add in these standoffs here. These are 36 millimeter standoffs, and I'm using a threaded standoff as well. So you want to make sure you have threads on the other side here. If you have one that's a little too long, you can also just take a hacksaw and just lop off some of that. Let's go ahead and grab a 8 millimeter bolt here. Again, I'd recommend you use some Loctite on this. We're just going to go ahead and twist this in. And holding this down, you're probably going to want some sort of linesman's or pliers that have a larger grip in the middle so that you can actually go ahead and grab this so that you can fully tighten it down. Otherwise, what you'll find is it's basically impossible for you to get a firm grip on this piece. Let me put an 8 millimeter up in the top here because it can be hard to get around that ball bearing. And perhaps I actually should have installed this before putting that ball bearing in so that I could go ahead and actually get that proper angle. But a little bit of pushing always can get you through a little bit more. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side to go ahead and line these up. Oh. Now, if you're going to be putting this in a little more permanently, again, Loctite's your best friend. You may also want to consider putting a washer in on this side so that you don't compress into the plastic too much. I'm not putting a washer in on this side because I'm going to be taking this apart in about 20 minutes. So it's not really a... Oh, and I'm a little bit long on that screw. Let's go ahead and reduce the size of that screw because I had to lop that down so my threads aren't quite as long on this. So let's grab an 8 millimeter screw. That should make life a little bit easier. But again, because I'm taking this apart, having this thing not fall apart on me is not as big a deal as before. Let's go ahead and make that motor mount. I'm going to go ahead and grab that pulley. And for me, I'm using a D-tooth shaft. You might want to use a Rex shaft for yours. We're going to go ahead and mount it so that there's this kind of like inner flange on this sonic hub. We're going to mount that to the inside of this pulley. And then we can have our bolt heads going through so that we can have a 10 millimeter hole sliding in nice and flush with that. You're also going to want to make sure that for your hub, your sonic hub, that you are using a threaded version, not an unthreaded version of that sonic hub, because they do come in 2 flavors. Again, Not a bad idea to Loctite these. Not as important on this part though. It's likely this won't be coming undone. Check you didn't use any screws that were too long to go through the Sonic hub. On this one, we're going to go ahead and mount this against our unit with the pulley facing into our ball bearings. We might need to loosen these off a little bit so that we can get a little bit of play on this here. Come on. I find this is easier to get the 8mm hex on. Ah, there we go. So if you're using a D shaft, you hopefully get it on there. And I find that if I kind of torque this, get it in on an angle, and then push it in, you can get just enough to be able to slide that in like so. And we're going to go ahead and mount this so we're basically on the edge of those ball bearings. Wherever these idler bearings are, it's best if they're in the center, but it's not super important. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually offset them a little bit to the right. I'll go ahead and clamp this down. There are two little clamping gears, or two little bolts that actually squeeze the aluminum into place. This actually compresses these little aluminum flags onto that shaft. And now you'll notice that we have just enough of a gap there for a timing belt to fit in between and not come undone from or not skip. So this is your motor assembly done. Let's go ahead and actually make up the rest of our slides. Then we're going to actually start mounting these slides on. When you mount these slides on, they are eventually going to be mounting vertically onto the side of your lift here. So you have to make sure that they are actually going to be moving up in the direction that it is that you want them to be moving up. There's also two sides to this bracket. There's the mounting hole, and then there's the actual side we're going to put the idler bearings on. We have to make sure the mounting hole, it goes on the opposite sides. In this respect, on the top part, we're going to put the mounting hole on this side, and we'll put the mounting holes on the far side there so that our idler bearing is facing, or the position for that idler bearing is going to be facing towards the motor itself. So let's go ahead and start mounting this up in this orientation. On the bottom of this little unit, I've got a little M3 lock nut. You can go ahead and slide that in. And I'm using a 8mm M3 countersunk head. That little countersunk head just allows to fit into the countersunk hole on this other backside of our Misumi slides. This is future Mr. Pratt coming in here. Future Pratt. You're now I'm now realizing you definitely need to get these idler bearings on before you mount this up, because otherwise you can't get your lock nuts in place. So with our idler bearings, we're going to grab a 30mm bolt. We're going to slide one side of that flange bearing in, the second side of that flange bearing on, and then we need to put on this little protector for our belts. But what you're going to find is you're not going to be able to get yourself up and over that point. So you need to slide down near the bottom, get those bearings just about off, and then you can actually slide it on and get that hole through. The inside, we've got this little curved section, and that corresponds with the curved section on the inside of our inserts here as well. So we can go ahead and slide that through so that that curve sits up nice. And then I've got an M4 lock nut that goes on the inside of this belt, and it slides in like so, and it holds itself into that place so that I can actually go ahead and tighten this up. A nice thing about this mount is that I don't even need to hold that lock nut with a set of pliers. You don't want to over torque this. You also want to make sure that that lock nut is nice and flush. Otherwise, you're going to have a bit of an issue on the back end. So let's go ahead and repeat that down as we go. This is one of those things that just takes some extra time to be able to assemble everything together. But in the end, it ends up being quite worth it. It's kind of one of those, I guess, Zen moments where you're just kind of threading bolts in and you're off to the races. We're going to go ahead and add idler bearings to everything on this one. And you may find that taking a slot screwdriver, pushing into that mount, allows you to get that little bit to hold that screw down. All right, so I've got all my idler bearings on here now. Definitely do this before you mount on those plastic pieces, or you can be like me and have to redo all of that. Again, if you're going to be installing this on your robot for a long period of time, to use a bit of Loctite, because there's a lot of vibrations that can go through linear slides. And because there's a ton of vibrations, if these things happen to jiggle loose, there's not a lot of tolerance between this point here and where that head of that screw might be, and it's really easy for them to get caught. So we're going to do the second stage, is going to stack on top of here now. In order to put these ones together, you could use a standard lock nut, but I'm going to use something called a sleeve nut because it makes such a clean connection. It's basically a little threaded or house nut. It's a little insert here. And we can slide this in on the inside of our Misumi slides like so. Then we'll grab another one of our inserts, making sure that we are putting the correct side out. And that is the incorrect side. That one's got a lock nut stuck inside of it. And we're going to go ahead and mount the other side. When you're putting your two slides together, make sure they both extend the same direction. We're going to use a little M8 or M3 8mm countersunk screw on here again. Go ahead and line that up. Oh, I just lost my sleeve nut. It just fell right out. Sometimes you might find putting this on the side to mount might make it easier as you get that started. A bit of a pain to assemble these as a multi-stage, but once you get them started, it's not too bad. Come on. There we go. There we go. Beautiful. And then in order to actually screw the sleeve nut in, I'm going to go ahead and hold it on one side, twist it in from the other. So I end up with a little bit of double constraint there. Oh, and I've installed that backwards. So I'm going to make sure I grab the correct side on this one. This is the correct side. As you can see, it's really easy to mess this up. So always got to be double checking your design, triple checking your design. Am I putting the right screw in the correct location? That is a big deal. All right, so that side's done. We're going to go ahead and do the other side as well. Make sure that I'm mounting everything up. We're going to, again, use a little sleeve nut for this. Thankfully, getting the sleeve nut through on this side is a lot easier. And then extend this out all the way to get that M8 or the 8mm M3 screw in there into our sleeve nut. Double checking in my brain that this is still going to work. Yes, it is. Let's go ahead and mount that third stage now. I'm going to go ahead and drop that sleeve nut through again on this side. Sometimes I find using my bolt there can help me slide it through. And then also checking to make sure that my stages extend the correct way. And then I've got all my hardware in the correct orientation, that strong orientation. Slide in that last piece like so. Make sure we get that sleeve nut actually in there. There we are. And then that last piece, make sure we're also extending out properly. We'll go ahead and put that M3 screw in. You're also probably going to find you're going to have to give your hands a good wash after this because there can be a lot of grease that can build up in this. Put on that last piece like so. Put in that other sleeve nut or house nut. Oh, I might have to hold that one with my finger as I put that in. And the other 8mm. And then screw it in like so. Oh, there we go. Beautiful. I've got my final stage here. Now again, we're going to have to mount this at the bottom of the last stage. So we're going to mount it on like so. Put on our M3 lock nut. And our last 8mm screw to hold that in place. Thankfully, 3D printing technology has gotten so fast now that you can print something up and done realistically in about 20 minutes, which is great. Now on the last part of this stage, you're going to notice we've got 2 holes here and 2 slots. These 2 holes are for a 30 millimeter bearing, 30 millimeter bolt and a 10 millimeter spacer. So I'm going to load that spacer onto that bolt, and then I'm going to slide that all the way through into a few lock nuts again. And we're going to tighten that up. Now on this one, I find taking a slot screwdriver and holding that lock nut in place really helps with holding this down so that the lock nut doesn't go. Again, don't compress this one like crazy because you don't want to snap the plastic on your bolt. Come on, get out of there. You don't want to shatter that plastic on your mount. That would be bad news bears for the day. Let me go ahead and slide that last one in. Get that screwdriver just to hold that in place. And then we'll tighten that last bolt up. There we go. We've got our main system now fully assembled. Now you don't need a part at the end here, but I'm going to add an extra one at the end here anyways, because it makes it easier for us to add something to mount to at the end. Otherwise, there's no real way for you to easily mount units at the end of this system here, unless you make something a little bit more custom. So again, you don't need that final point, but I'm just going to leave it empty for now. Now this last section is a bit of a choose your own adventure. I'm going to take this motor mount, and the intention is that it slides on underneath like so that it can lift on and grab onto your system. But it depends on where this is actually going to go to your system. An easy mount that I have found to be able to do this is to be able to grab a large part on the side like this that will constrain your whole system together. Now this is obviously far too long for this system. You could use something a lot shorter. That's what I'm going to use in this tutorial, but it's up to you as to how you actually go about constraining this to your system. So to be able to do that, we're going to go ahead and attach this to our system like so. And I'm going to take a little quarter pillar block. I'm going to add it on to this point right here. Getting underneath here, we're going to go ahead and add in our bolts. Use little 8 millimeter bolts here. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You don't want to use too long of bolts into these little pillow blocks. All right, that's nice and mounted. Go ahead and mount this long block up like so. And we're going to use a couple bolts in on the edges here. Again, using some 8 millimeters. So that you're nice and tight. Oh, come on. There we go. Oh. You don't want to go with too long of a bolt into these little pillow blocks, because then what's going to happen is you're going to actually run into the other bolt on the other side of these pillow blocks, and that's not quite what you want. Okay, got a nice secure mount on that side. We're going to go ahead and mount this up like so. And on my design, again, you could have something custom for here. You could even just lop these off. But these little bolts make it nice and easy to mount this onto, go build this pattern. So we're going to go ahead and find some mounting holes that will match up. So I found a couple mounting holes here. You really want to make sure you line this up so you can get a couple mounting holes that work for you. And in your specific setup, I've found that the last corner on this top part works really well as one mounting hole. And then on the other side down here, the front left corner works really well on this side. So we're going to go ahead and tighten those down with some lock nuts. At this point, we rotate it and we can change our angle up a wee bit here. Okay, so we've got ourselves nice and mounted. Now it's time to actually get our timing belt on. And with our timing belt, first thing we're going to do is we're going to attach it to the bottom point here. And we're going to use GoBuilda's little clips here. They're super cheap. They're a great little piece. They're just a little clamping mount. And what they do is they hold the teeth together, and the teeth themselves end up stopping this thing from slipping around. So I'm going to go ahead and get that on nice and tight. We're going to go ahead and slide this on through the back and give ourselves a few more teeth so we get a little bit of space. And then we're going to pull this all the way up. And I'm going to give a little tension. I'm going to try to pull up on the belt here as I tighten this down so that we don't lose anything. We don't lose any tension on that system. Okay. Now we've got that holding on nice and tight. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to straighten this out, make sure there's no kinks in my belt. Because if there's any kinks in my belt, this system will not slide through. I'm going to go ahead with the teeth facing down, slide it under and through these little idler bearings. So it comes around on either side of that idler bearing. And now we can go ahead and pull the whole system through. There we go. And now on this one, we're going to go ahead and just start feeding through our system. This first one, I'm going to go ahead and rotate 90 degrees so we can actually get through here. Again, make sure I've got no kinks in my system. I'm going to pull through the bottom bearing, up and in. On the second one, we're going to go through on the back of the pulley on this next bearing, back onto the teeth, the next one, and we're basically just kind of going forward, backward, until we get to the end of our belts. The GoBuilda kit comes with quite a few meters of this system, or quite a few meters of the G2 belt, and you're just going to cut it to size, depending on the length that you need. I'm going to go ahead and fully retract this system, give it a really good tug as I come through so that we can get that last belt clip on. Oh, I need to prepare my last belt clip. This thing, you may need attention a couple times to try as time goes by, but you should be able to clamp it on like so, slide it forward, and that should give you a pretty adequate amount of tension. You want this thing to be a bit like a guitar string when you're plucking at it. Too much tension, and you're adding too much force onto your system. Too little tension, and you'll introduce unnecessary slack to your system. We can give it a little hand test here, just with running our system with our hands, and that feels pretty good all the way across our system. And that's it. That's how you assemble this. You may need to tighten this a little bit tighter, grab a bolt and move a tooth as time goes by. But let's actually get this motor powered up and see what it's like under a little bit of speed. Looks like we're baselining at about 0.85, 0.83, somewhere in that realm. Let's say about 0.85.